Ozzy Osbourne was in the middle of Crazy Train when someone in the crowd screamed something that made him stop the entire Ozzfest. What happened next left 50,000 metalheads in tears. It was August 12, 2004, at the Pepsi Center in Denver, Colorado. Ozzfest was in full swing, and the energy was absolutely insane. Ozzy had already torn through Bark at the Moon, Mr. Crowley, and War Pigs. The crowd of 50,000 metalheads was going absolutely wild. Now he was launching into what everyone came to hear, the iconic opening riff of Crazy Train. But what nobody in that arena knew was that in the 8th row, center pit, stood a 16-year-old boy who wasn't supposed to live to see his next birthday. Tyler Brennan was dying. The acute lymphoblastic leukemia that had ravaged his body for 3 years was finally winning, and his oncologist had given him less than 2 months to live. His parents, Jennifer and Michael Brennan, had made the gut-wrenching decision to take him out of hospice care for one final wish. "Mom, I need to see Ozzy," Tyler had said that morning, his voice hoarse from the treatments. "Before I go, I need to be in that pit one more time." Jennifer had tried to explain that Ozzfest tickets were impossible to get this late, especially pit tickets. But Michael Brennan, a construction worker who'd raised Tyler on Black Sabbath and Ozzy's solo albums, had spent every dollar in their savings and called in every favor he had. At 3 p.m. that afternoon, just hours before the show, a scalper had sold them 3 pit passes for triple the price. Tyler was so weak that Michael had to support him the entire walk from the parking lot to their spot in the pit. The teenager was wearing his father's vintage 1981 Blizzard of Oz tour shirt, 3 sizes too big, and a bandana to cover the hair he'd lost during his last round of chemo. His arms were covered in bruises from the IV lines, and his skin had that translucent quality that comes with terminal illness. For the first 90 minutes of Ozzfest, Tyler was in pure heaven. Despite the exhaustion, despite the pain, he was headbanging to every song. His thin voice was lost in the roar of 50,000 people, but the pure joy on his face was unmistakable. "This is it, Mom," he whispered during a brief break. "This is how I want to remember being alive." Jennifer fought back tears, knowing this would probably be Tyler's last good day. When Ozzy's band kicked into the opening riff of Crazy Train, Tyler's face lit up with an intensity that broke his mother's heart. This was his song, the song that had gotten him through every hospital stay, every painful treatment. This song was everything. Ozzy was halfway through the first verse, screaming into the microphone with that legendary intensity. The entire arena was moving as one, fists in the air, voices screaming every word. That's when it happened. From somewhere in the pit, a woman's voice cut through the wall of sound. It was Jennifer Brennan, and she was screaming with the desperation of a mother watching her child slip away. "Ozzy, please, my son is dying. He loves you." Ozzy kept playing for a few more seconds, probably thinking he'd misheard over the noise. But Jennifer screamed again, this time standing on her tiptoes and waving her arms frantically. "Ozzy, please, he's got weeks left. He just wanted to see you one more time." Ozzy stopped singing mid-word. He held up his hand, and the band gradually came to a halt. The entire Pepsi Center started to quiet down as 50,000 people realized something unprecedented was happening. Ozzfest didn't stop, not for anything. The Prince of Darkness walked to the edge of the stage, squinting through the stage lights into the pit. "What did you say, love?" Ozzy's voice, now clear through the arena's speakers, had lost its performance edge. He sounded genuinely confused. Jennifer, tears streaming down her face, lifted Tyler's bandana-wrapped head higher. "This is my son Tyler," she shouted, her voice cracking. "He's 16 years old, and he's dying from leukemia. The doctors gave him weeks. All he wanted was to see you perform one more time. He's loved you his whole life." The arena went dead silent. 50,000 metalheads, bikers, punks, goths, everyone, all turned to look at the woman holding up a rail-thin teenager who was clearly very, very sick. Ozzy put his hand over his eyes to block the lights, leaning forward to see better. "What's your name, son?" Ozzy called out. Tyler, summoning every ounce of strength he had left, managed to shout loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Tyler Brennan, I've loved you since I was 3 years old." The words hung in the air. 50,000 people held their breath. What Ozzy did next had never happened in Ozzfest's 11-year history. He turned to his band and said, "Boys, we're taking a break." Then he addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to give me a few minutes here. Something more important than rock and roll is happening right now." Ozzy walked off stage, leaving 50,000 people in absolute shock. Backstage, Ozzy was moving with purpose. Sharon Osbourne, his wife and manager, asked what was happening. "There's a dying kid in the pit," Ozzy said. "Get him back here, now." "Ozzy, we can't stop the whole festival for—" "Sharon," Ozzy interrupted. "That boy is dying. He came here to see me. I'm not letting him die having only seen me from 100 feet away." Within 3 minutes, security was escorting the Brennan family through the backstage corridors. Tyler could barely walk. His father was carrying him, and the teenager kept asking if this was real or if the morphine was making him hallucinate. In Ozzy's dressing room, something beautiful unfolded. Ozzy sat down next to Tyler, who was now lying on the leather couch, too weak to sit upright. "Hey there, Tyler," Ozzy said softly, his famous voice gentle now. "Your mom tells me you're a fan." Tyler nodded, tears running down his gaunt face. "I listen to Mama, I'm Coming Home every night in the hospital. It makes me less scared of dying." Ozzy felt his throat close up. For all his wild reputation, for all the madness and the chaos, he was a father. He had kids. And here was someone's son, 16 years old, talking about dying. "You know what, mate?" Ozzy said, his own eyes getting wet. "That's one of my favorites, too. Would you like me to sing it for you? Just us?" Tyler's eyes went wide. Despite everything, despite the pain, despite the cancer eating him alive, despite knowing he had maybe days left, he smiled. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the madman who'd bitten a bat's head off, who'd snorted ants, who'd done every crazy thing imaginable, sat in his dressing room and sang "Mama, I'm Coming Home" more tenderly than he'd ever sung it before. No microphone, no stage lights, no pyrotechnics, just a dying 16-year-old boy and his crying parents. When Ozzy returned to the stage 15 minutes later, he wasn't alone. He was supporting Tyler Brennan, practically carrying him. The sight of Ozzy walking out with this obviously sick teenager left 50,000 people completely silent. You could hear the wind blowing across the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ozzy said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to meet my friend Tyler Brennan. Tyler is 16 years old, and he's fighting a battle that no teenager should have to fight. But Tyler here is tougher than all of us. He's a true metalhead. And tonight, Tyler's going to help me finish this show." The response wasn't the usual Ozzfest screaming. It was respectful, emotional applause. The kind you hear when people know they're witnessing something sacred. Ozzy sat down on a stool that crew members had brought out, with Tyler sitting next to him. The band started playing Crazy Train again, slower this time, almost like a ballad. And then, something magical happened. Tyler, despite being so weak he could barely hold his head up, started singing along. His voice was thin and fragile, but it was there. And Ozzy, the legend himself, harmonized with him, turning one of metal's most aggressive songs into something tender and heartbreaking. 50,000 metalheads sang along, but quietly, respectfully, turning the entire Pepsi Center into one massive gentle chorus for a dying teenager. There wasn't a dry eye in that arena. Grown men with full-sleeve tattoos were crying, bikers were sobbing, parents were holding their own kids tighter than they ever had before. When the song ended, Ozzy held Tyler close and whispered something in his ear that only the boy could hear. Tyler smiled, the first real smile his parents had seen in months. "Tyler," Ozzy said into the microphone, "you've made this the most important show I've ever played. Thank you for being here, mate." As crew members came to help Tyler back to his parents, the teenager did something that stopped everyone. He took off the bandana he'd been wearing to hide his bald head, and he tied it around Ozzy's wrist. "So you remember me," Tyler whispered. Ozzy Osbourne, the man who'd terrorized the music industry for 40 years, broke down crying in front of 50,000 people. Ozzy finished Ozzfest wearing Tyler's bandana, and every song he performed seemed to be dedicated to the brave kid who was now back in his father's arms in the pit. After the show, Ozzy spent another 2 hours with the Brennan family. He signed everything they had, gave Tyler his set list, and promised to visit him in hospice care the following week. But here's the part that nobody saw coming, the part that defies medical explanation. Tyler Brennan didn't die in 2 months. He didn't even die that year. Something about that night, whether it was the adrenaline, the love from 50,000 strangers, or just the power of having his dream come true, gave Tyler a surge of strength that his doctors called impossible. His cancer, which had been aggressively spreading, somehow stabilized. Not cured, but stabilized. Tyler lived for 2 more years after that Ozzfest, 2 years that his oncologist said were medically impossible, 2 years filled with quality time with his family, more Ozzy concerts. Ozzy made sure Tyler had backstage passes to every show within driving distance, and most importantly, 2 years without fear. After that night, Jennifer Brennan said in an interview years later, Tyler wasn't afraid anymore. He'd met his hero. He'd sung with Ozzy in front of 50,000 people. He knew that even if his life was short, it had meant something. It had been witnessed. He'd been seen. When Tyler finally passed away in September 2006, he was wearing the Ozzfest backstage pass Ozzy had given him that magical August night. His funeral was attended by over 1,000 people, including several members of Ozzy's band. The experience with Tyler Brennan changed Ozzy profoundly. From that night forward, Ozzy made it a point to meet sick fans at every show. Ozzy was different after Tyler, said Zakk Wylde, Ozzy's longtime guitarist. He realized his music wasn't just entertainment. For some people, it's what keeps them alive. Ozzy kept Tyler's bandana for the rest of his performing career. It's now framed in his home studio, along with photos from that incredible night. In 2008, the Tyler Brennan Memorial Foundation was established by Jennifer and Michael to grant final wishes to terminally ill teenagers. The foundation's motto, something more important than rock and roll. To date, they've granted over 3,000 wishes. The story of Ozzy and Tyler reminds us that sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we stop performing and start being human. Ozzy could have ignored Jennifer's plea. He could have finished his set and gone home. Instead, he chose compassion over the show. He chose human connection over obligation. He chose to be John Osborne instead of Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. And in doing so, he gave a dying teenager 2 more years of life, gave 50,000 people a memory they'll never forget, and gave all of us a reminder that fame means nothing if we don't use it to touch lives. Today, there's a small plaque backstage at the Pepsi Center in Denver that reads, "In memory of Tyler Brennan and all the young warriors who remind us what really matters." August 12, 2004. Every band that plays that venue sees that plaque, and many ask about the story. When they hear about Ozzy and Tyler, something changes in how they view their own performances. Because that August night reminds us that we never know who's in our audience. We never know who needs a moment of magic, a touch of hope, or just the knowledge that they matter. Ozzy stopped Ozzfest for Tyler Brennan. But really, Tyler saved Ozzfest by reminding Ozzy and all of us what music is really about. It's not about being the Prince of Darkness or the loudest or the craziest. It's about connection between human souls. It's about using whatever platform we have to make someone else's life a little brighter. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it's about giving a dying teenager the strength to live 2 more years by showing him he's loved by 50,000 strangers and a legend who became his friend. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and smash that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the heart behind the madness. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone stopped everything to help another person? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the humanity behind music's greatest legends.